I'm with the OG Andre Cronje. He was big in Phantom Keeper, Wi-Fi as well, behind many DeFi projects. So I wanted to ask you, Andre, what is your advice for DeFi founders right now? It's pretty rough, right?
I mean, it's obviously a turbulent time, so it's hard for a lot of people. But I think the best advice to give any founder currently is don't found anything. Don't launch a protocol, don't build anything, don't deploy anything, don't update anything. If you already deployed something, walk away from it for a while, get yourself disconnected for it. Because like the problem right now is, but there's always been issues like exploits and all of these things. And there's already a lot of risk, and there's already a lot of stuff you worry about. Now you're dealing with user deposits and these kinds of things. But aside from this, and aside from reputational risk that you potentially have when inevitably you launch a token and it goes down a little bit and people are going to attack you and all of those things, also not worth it. There's the psychology and stress of the user deposits and things the whole time. But even excluding all of that, there's now a new problem being added of regulatory pressure. Like there's not a single current DeFi team in the space that has not received a letter from some regulatory agency or has had a questionnaire or something. Now you've got regulatory pressure, you've got exploit pressure, there's very little upside. You're basically doing it for free at the start if you're lucky enough for a token to actually do anything. I mean, I guess if you have to do it anon. But short of that, and like then your OPSEC has to be fantastic, which is another thing to worry about. Because like most people, going anon isn't just opening up a ProtonMail account and opening an account on Twitter. You know, there's a lot more that goes into that in terms of like your footprint and where you commit and like there's a lot of stuff. So the best advice right now is really just don't. Like if you have something to build, keep it in the drawer. Wait, I think until there's some jurisdiction that's actually friendly to this. But other than that, it's a bleak time.
Okay, so the main concern for you is regulation, right? Because I was going to ask you, okay, wait for what? You know, what's going to change in 6 months, in a year to make the environments better for funders?
The regulations. We're seeing clear steps, some good, some bad. Like the EO were taking good steps. Now this new bill they launched a little bit iffy with the access controls you have to put and stuff. And another problem is because one of the other jurisdiction hasn't gotten a strong foothold, the US is kind of pushing itself and bullying everywhere, irrespective of the other jurisdictions. So like you need another jurisdiction to almost protect you to be able to fight against that. I'm not saying completely get out of the space. I'm saying wait. I'm saying bide your time right. But right now is a good time to be building behind closed doors.
Do you have an opinion on CBDCs? Do you think CBDCs can maybe help crypto because there's maybe going to be some kind of like wallets or everything? Or do you think it's going to be worse?
The one thing to understand is that a country's ability to control its monetary supply is 99% of its power. When you remove its ability to be able to influence its citizens via monetary policy, there's very little you can actually do against it. So if that's your most powerful tool / function that you have, would you willingly give that up? And the answer is just no. So there's no way that any CBDC, and I believe there will be CBDCs to some extent, but it'll be centralized controlled issuance stuff, similar to like USDC or USDT or stuff like that. They're basically CBDCs. There will be stuff like that, but it won't be CBDC CBDCs. You know, it won't be decentralized, it won't have transparency, and I do believe that it will be attempted to be used as a tool to gain control over crypto. So, I mean, if you look at something like USDT or USDC today, if the US state played it a little bit better, they could have used those to actually gain control of crypto. Because, I mean, if you control those by virtue of the amount of liquidity and stuff, if you decide you're going to draw that out of the ecosystem, you're destroying the ecosystem. So they had an immeasurable amount of power they could exercise by controlling these assets. Now, luckily, they haven't yet. But presumably, eventually, you know, they're fighting sort of thinking they can stop it right now, but eventually they learn that we can't stop it. So we have to do something else, and that's when they start trying to control it. And then they realize, well, we can't control the software, we can't control the people. What else can we do? And they're going to go after the assets. So I do think we're going to see what we now call CBDCs, but it's not going to be anything that sort of the opium people think it's going to be. So it's not going to be a good thing.
You are famous for, in your Twitter bio, how I test in prod. Is this a meme? To what extent is it a meme? What does it mean? Is it some kind of like advice for founders?
The original reason when I started coding decentralized finance apps, and we are never any of that stuff, is I didn't raise money, I didn't have VC backing, I didn't have anything, so I couldn't actually pay for audits. I added the I test in prod as a warning / disclaimer to people to say, hey, I tested broad, I don't have these security things, there be dragons here, please be careful. And it was meant to be a warning that, hey, please tread carefully and do proper due diligence here. I've done as much as I can, but like there's always limitations to how much you can do. And the fact that it kind of turned into this degenerate / YOLO mentality of, oh, test the pro, just go for it, just throw the stuff on chain, like it became the antithesis of like what I intended with it. So like I had a little bit of like a cringe whenever anyone brings it up, because, you know, it was meant to be things be responsible, and it ended up being the exact opposite.
What's your view on VC backing in the space in general?
Look, good old Munger, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. A VC's incentive is not decentralization, it's not open source, it's not any of these things, it's making money for their LPs, it's profit. And profit, and a lot of what real decentralization is, a lot of what real open source is altruism. Altruism and profit, they don't match. I think we tell ourselves it's a necessary evil. I kind of wanted to disprove that by like launching here without any funding or any backing or any of that stuff, and like show people, hey, you can do this by just like coding in your spare time and then figuring it out if these things work. And by like, you know, creating the fair launch, which again, term I hate, but anyway, you know, like token out of nothing and then using that to like propagate your system. It's a lot easier, that path to walk, if you have initial funding, if you have an initial backup. And building out your protocol and getting users is a lot easier when you have those incentivized people. I think for maybe like a grassroots VC, there could still be value. The big guys, you know, the Paradigm called the A16Zs or whatever, you know, it's about their LP thing. Like they're not managing the projects. They are just identifying projects that can grow their fund. You're managing the LP fund. That's their goal. Your smaller guys, like Framework back to there is a good example. They were very, very heavily invested in their teams, and they actually wanted to see their teams grow. And like that obviously had the benefit of, is they put that time and energy in, that's going to come off later in their LP performance.
Andre, thank you. Would you have any last word, any story, anything? Go for it.
The one sort of moral I always like leaving people with is information, narrative spreads a lot faster that technology develops. So there's a pace mismatch between how fast people expect things to happen and the space, and how quickly it's actually happening. To use an example, like around 2017, 2018, we started talking to like institutions or governments and these kinds of things, and they didn't even respond to our emails. Around like 2018, 2019, you know, we'd get a meeting with some entry-level guys. By like the end of 2020 to 2021, we were actually like meeting like high-level execs and directors and stuff. Now that's taken a step back again due to all of the fallout and everything. It makes sense. We're not pushing and pursuing. But the point is, you know, like everyone's sort of trying to force adoption. Everyone's trying to force usage. Everyone's trying to sort of fit the square peg into the round hole as hard as they can. And like, it's not going to work. You need to take that step back. You need to understand these things are going to take so much longer than anyone thinks they're going to take. But if you have that patience, it's definitely worth the ride.
You were saying information spreads faster than real technology adoption. And this is funny because I've been studying this quite a bit, because we actually like have a social network for memes. Okay. And I was thinking, what if they just spent 5 million out of their 200 million, right? They can give grants with the remaining 195 to hire 50 people to create a shit ton of memes and spread them on Twitter, right? How much bigger would they be? And I think there's a case for it. So it's maybe short-term, maybe hype and so on. But I think it's a bit like the VCs, right? Maybe you need a bit of that, bit of fun, bit of like, you know, spice to it sometimes.
I think most of the teams are currently missing the ball in terms of what they're spending money on, because the reason why I think then paying out those big brands to this team is kind of on the same level as like doing that meme thing, is because it doesn't create retention. It's going to create an initial spike, like when the new protocol launches with its new token, there's a spike. But then the retention quickly falls off. Like our churn rate in blockchain is way too high. And I think trying to work on that churn is the more important thing. It's why aren't our people sustainable, more so than how do we attract a lot of people. So I'd rather let's say right now we keep 5% of DeFi people in the DeFi ecosystem. I'd rather push that number up to 10% of that same pool of people without any new people than trying to attract that same percentage of people externally. And like, it's a lot harder to attract them in any case. Now, I mean, if I can't fix my churn on the small base, definitely not going to fix it on a bigger base. So the problem right now is more, again, comes back to we're trying to force adoption right now. Like it's not fine yet. It's not ready yet. We've proven the concept, and the concept is solid, but we don't have the product. We don't have it in the MVP yet. So like, everyone just needs to chill back with it. Let the base layers continue improving our performance and with, so that gas fees can come down, input can go up. People can start building more complex apps. We can do more complex VM logic, and then we can have neo apps that allow more use. It's equivalent to saying back when we only had IRC as a communication channel, why didn't the whole world use IRC? Not everyone had a computer, data connectivity was hard, you needed to understand dial-up modems, and then you needed to be able to figure out where to find this app in this protocol and connect. Today, everyone has a chat app, no matter who it is, because the technology has advanced to a point where we could remove all of those barriers of entry and make it that easy for adoption. You can't force adoption. All you can do is remove barriers to allow the adoption.
You're talking about user retention, sustainability. It's making me think about all these DeFi farming with extremely high APY at the start, and then which obviously falls down. And so everyone was spinning these farms, jumping from one to another. But at the same time, if you give a 10% boring APY, no one cares. So I'm just wondering, maybe us humans fundamentally, we like the exciting stuff. So how do you attract users in a sustainable way if you don't make them excited with something interesting in the short term only? How do you balance this out?
You stop rushing the short run. Like, sure, it's going to take long. And like the 10% one, if you look at its active depositors and users, and a year from now, it'll be more than the one that did 1,000% for the first week. So like, the problem is everyone compares that time slice, right? Like, well, at its peak, it had so many deposits. Doesn't anyone? The 10% one, sure, it had much less, but it has now. And like, that's been a thing that I found really frustrating with the space, because often you have to fight against those unsustainable numbers, because people are like, oh, why would I want to deposit with you? I can deposit there for 10x more. And then you're like, well, because it's not going to be there next week and it's unsustainable, blah, blah, blah. That's why a big thing with Europe, for example, was deposit and forget, because you don't need to go switch it every week, because every week there's a new thing you need to go into. It's instant versus delayed gratification. Everyone wants it now, versus, I can promise you, the 10% one wins. It just wins over a much longer time scale.
So slow down to go further.
Exactly that.
Thank you, Andre.
Fantastic. Appreciate it.
Cheers.